presentation with a video that you need to see. It was part of the Disclosure Project, Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project in 2001. And the reason why I want to start with this video is because I'm going to be talking about crash retrieval. And today, for the first time ever, I'm going to release a brand new case. So I'm going to show you the testimony of Clifford Stone. And I think it's very important. This was done in Washington, D.C. I think you need to hear what he has to say. And if we could go ahead and start this.
Washington, D.C., and our government states that UFOs don't exist. This is from the Blue Book files, the overflights of July 19th, 20th, and 26th, 27th of UFOs over Washington, D.C., in which they said they were nothing more than temperature inversions. Of course, the air traffic controllers did not understand that because they were saying they were good, solid returns, craft under intelligent control that was exhibiting technologies that we could not do at that time. But then again, no one ever found any pieces, or did they? Actually, a Navy commander found a piece that he turned over to the U.S. government. That piece was never returned. Most people don't know that this exists in the Project Blue Book files. He did his own analysis. Then he asked the Air Force what they thought of the piece. They never returned it. The point I'm trying to get at is that for 22 years in the military, I didn't let my family know what I was doing. And you pay a price for that. My family always thought that I volunteered too much. And I love my country, and I laid down my life for my country as I would today. But my family always thought that I was volunteering. They'd go see my commanders and try to tell them I'm working too much, I'm working too much. Lost 90 days of leave that I had to give back to the U.S. government because I couldn't take the leave. And that upset the family. But what they didn't know is what I'm going to tell you tonight. There were craft that did not originate on the face of this planet. They had living beings in them, living entities, people, very much like you and myself. When I say that, I mean that they had cultures, they had lives, they had families, they had likes, they had dislikes. It wouldn't take me too awful long after being exposed to the program where we were doing recoveries that I came to realize this. But then I could never ever tell my family what I was doing. I'm wanting to relate one incident to you, and that one incident is the incident that really propelled me on to that type of situation. And that happened at a place called Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. I was in the 36 Civil Affairs. That's a 36 Civil Affairs company. That's a group that would go out and establish a military government pending the establishment of a civilian government should we be involved in a conflict in which we would take over a foreign country. We would naturally want to return civilian leadership to that country, and that would be the job of the Civil Affairs units in trying to establish that goal. However, each company in 1969 had NBC units, and I was a member of the NBC unit. That was my primary job as the unit NBC NCO and the communications NCO. Exact day, month, I can't tell you because I never ever planned to relive this, never ever planned to tell a group about this, but I can tell you the year was 1969. When we went out on that field training exercise. Somewhere during the course of the night, we had some people come up and tell us that there was a craft that crashed, possibly a U.S. aircraft, may have some type of nuclear device on it, and we were going to move out to that location, just the NBC team. You form what's called an NBC quick response team, and when I wasn't on an FTX or doing my normal duties back at the unit in which I was, you would have a staging area where for 3 days you would be on a 30-minute alert notice to move out should there be an NBC emergency. After that 3 days, you had another unit come in. There was 5 units. So out of 15 days, you would pull 3 days where you were on a 3-day alert. When we moved out to the location, we started to approach the location where we were seeing lights. They had the big lights, and I understand those lights are called light-alls. we saw that there was some type of craft, like the shape of a hill, that was buried into the ground. As we approached it, I didn't think too much of it. I was trying to ascertain what type of craft it could be, but I couldn't readily recognize it. Once we did get to our location, what we call our staging area, I immediately started to go ahead setting up the 312 telephones that we needed set up, and our Prick 25 within our communications deuce and a half, and that's what we were using, was a deuce and a half for our communications vehicle. I set the one Prick 25, which is a field radio, on the company push, then the emergency push that we had for the unit that was out there, which I was assuming was a quick response team to this location. I was immediately told, specialists, do you have a APD-27 on board your vehicle? I turned around and said, yes, sir, I do. He says, get it out, and you need to walk toward the craft. We need surface readings as to the radiation count. So I started to go ahead, get it, and I was walking toward it, and I was yelling out the counts as every time that the Geiger counter would shoot up. Once I got to the craft where it was buried partially at about a 30-degree slant into the ground, I could look down into the craft, and I saw what appeared to be a cockpit. The cockpit wasn't open. On the side of the craft was like a kidney-shaped hatch that had been fully over it. You couldn't even see the seam. But in this case, it was open. Once I got there, I went ahead and I looked down, and I knew what I was looking at wasn't human in our definition of human, in that it was smaller. The head was much larger proportionately than what the head of a human being would be. It was hanging out over the side, and I was pretty sure it was dead. Alongside of it was another one that was hanging out halfway out, one arm, one head, and I was getting a higher than average background radiation reading at that time. And I told him that. Then I went ahead and I said, I need an officer up here. And all I heard was, it's okay, son, just tell us what you're seeing. I said, no, sir, I don't think you understand. I need an officer up here. And they says, just tell us what you're seeing. And I told them essentially what I've told you tonight. That would be the first case that I'd ever be involved in as far as making an approach to entities in which we saw that had been killed. I can tell you there were 4 entities in that crash. Wasn't too awful long after that I got to see a live one. In that incident, I can tell you we had communications with that entity. And I can tell you one of the words that rang loud and true in my ears, I am afraid. Me and another me and another soldier assisted that entity in escaping. The guy I always called the colonel, who was really the guy that always led the teams that we were on, every team I was on anyhow, he came and was telling me what could happen to me, very angry at me. He said, do you know what the penalties are giving aid and comfort to the enemy? And I said, excuse me, sir, I thought you called him a guest. And he says, well, don't let it happen again. I told him if I was caught in the same situation, I'd do it again. I could identify with that entity's very simple, I won't go into how I knew, but simple verbiage, I am afraid. I mean, you never felt as much pity as what you would have felt at that time. There was a little place called Vietnam. It was only, several thousand miles away from home, and I too was afraid at 19. But the whole situation is, these were things we were never going to talk about. These were things that we were never going to bring up. These were things I was going to keep from my family. Then the day arrived. I felt that my family had a right to know I wasn't there for certain things. Why sometimes I was quick to snap, and why I could never, ever have the luxury of having friends, because I might say something. So when the day finally arrived that I felt that I should tell them, I told them. And I was very afraid even at that time telling them, but I thought they had a right to know. Tonight I come to you as a scared individual, a scared little man, telling you just a piece of what went on in my life. There were other incidences, but I felt you too might like to know that that is the case. And I said it yesterday, and I'll say it again, that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. It's evidence that is just simply denied to the American people. I stand here to tell you that before my Almighty God, I am willing to go and stand before Congress and tell them what I have told you tonight as being the truth, and I interrelate more of the events that have occurred, because I have moral obligation not only to my family but to every American and every person on the face of this planet. I have that moral obligation, possibly even to our visitors. The situation is, we're not alone in the universe, and I just thought you might like to know. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
It's very important that you see this testimony, because this is a very brave man. He's a hero. And the thing that I would like to stress is that I finally got Clifford Stone, after working with him for 5 years, to write his life story. And so his book, Eyes Only, is available. And the reason why that commander said, son, you go up there and you tell us what you see, is because Clifford was a contactee at a very young age, 3 years old. And somebody knew. So somebody encouraged him to enter the Army at 16 years old when he wasn't qualified because he had back problems. Somebody asked him to be part, he didn't know he was part of this. He said, you know, I didn't think I was trained for this. This was 1969, Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. So wrap your mind around that crash. He's not lying. So what in the world are we dealing with crashes? So the thing about Clifford Stone is that often who has to go to these places are people that have an intuitive power to be able to communicate. That's why the commander didn't come down, because if there was a live one, and Clifford talks about Vietnam and his encounter with live ones, there were 8 that he was involved with, 8 crashes, that the language is telepathy. And if you're already contacted and you've developed that skill, it's very interesting to be part of a unit the way he was. Now, his book also includes a lot of documents that proves that he said he did what he did. But we'll go on to something brand new, because this DVD, this whole presentation is history. I don't expect anything to come of it, because George Knapp asked a real great question at the press conference. He says, how can you convince people to come to a UFO conference? And my answer is, you can't. Only the people that have a curious mind, only the people that have something inside that says this is real, that this is a bigger question, will be passionate about coming to something like this, or coming to any kind of informational UFO conference. And thank God we still have them, because information is so important. So my job as a journalist, as Barbara Walters, as so forth, is just to bring the story. It's not about me. It's not about any part of it, because I have a curious mind. I want to know. In my lifetime, I want to know. And that's what brings me forth to do this work, because God knows there's no sponsor for it. If you were trained like me with Dr. J. Allen Hynek to do field research, you have to go on location. You can't do it on internet, and you certainly can't do it over the phone. So I'm going to go very quickly to my life, my 30 years of working in this field, and I encourage more women to get into this field, is that I have all these interviews, and I didn't know what to do with them, so they are in books, and that's the Italian book. I am Italian. I was born in Rome. I worked in Rome from 1992 to 2007 when I moved back to the United States, Boulder, Colorado. Okay, so I've done a lot of work in Europe. There are the books with all the interviews, and that's everybody from Monsignor Balducci to all the remote viewers, Uri Geller, Ingo Swann, Paul Smith, all the remote viewers, plus all the military people I've interviewed, Robert Dean, Colonel Philip Corso, Monsignor, just everybody that I thought were interesting. Now, these are the magazines I write for, because I write for magazines in Europe, because there isn't any place. I subscribe to Open Minds. It's an incredible magazine, but it's the only one in the United States. Very few really serious media gets put out in the United States. So I write for the one in Europe. Just now, that latest edition has the citizen hearing, which I consider the single most important event after the movie Sirius, because I was a consultant on that film, that ever happened. Even though it was a mock kind of hearing, I was sitting in the front row. You can see my picture. I'm sitting right in the front row there, and I am watching these poor congressmen and these poor senators sitting there thinking they're going to get a bunch of sightings. I'm watching their face, because this is very interesting as a journalist. When these military witnesses, 40 of them, half of them from Latin America, a general from Peru, another general from Brazil, serious people, Jesse Marcel Jr. with his family, Nick Pope, everybody come before them, their faces turned white. When they went out for the coffee break, 2 of them were shaking because they did not know it was real. And I talked to Senator Gravel, and he is stepping up to the plate to do something about this, because as Senator Gravel and Congress Lady Carolyn Fitzpatrick said, and she was brilliant, God bless her, something needs to be done, but we can't do it within the United States Senate, so it has to be maybe an international discussion. So with Paraguay, who's a very small country, they're going to try to do a resolution, for the international UN. Now, the thing is this, nothing will ever come of it, maybe. Nothing will ever come of this, but there was something that did come of it. We did talk about it. So you look at it as a media event. Everybody that tuned in, we are talking about this. Dialogue is important, and the reason why I say this is because I taught for 30 years. I taught honors English, I taught ancient history. That's what I was doing in Italy, teaching in a private school. And I know as a teacher that research, how research is done, you go to the first-hand source, plus you got to talk about it. Everybody sits around and dialogues about it. This is not Disneyland. This is not something funny. I don't know what's funny about a pilot that, like Jean-Charles Duboc, who is the pilot of an Air France commercial airliner that sees a huge UFO over Paris and has all the passengers in the back. And he doesn't know what to do. And by the way, that UFO that Jean-Charles Duboc saw was over a nuclear installation, so what does that tell you? So I interviewed Duboc, and he was part of the Cometa report, and he didn't think it was funny. So I don't know where the ridicule factor comes in. I think what has to happen is we have to discuss it. Now, Sirius, the film, is step one, and it's the people. It's the people. I was with Stephen Greer out there in Crestone, and I did see amazing things, but I had to sit out there in the cold from about 9 o'clock till 3 in the morning, which they pulled me out there kicking and screaming because I don't want to be cold. But it changed my life. It changed everything about what I believe. And in fact, Amadit Kalinka, that was the director on the film, he was so shocked he forgot to turn the cameras on. So what we saw in Crestone, but I'm sure you can see it at Joshua Tree, I'm sure you can see it in different places, if you do the proper protocols, was absolutely amazing. Clifford Stone is a hero. He basically is, he talks about crash retrieval. He's also part of Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project. I went to his house several times. I have a DVD of my interviewing him. This is field research. This is the book, Eyes Only. This is field research. That means you spend a lot of time with the person because you've got to be sure that they're telling the truth. You know, you've got to be sure that they know what they're saying. The need for a disciplined area, you know, I'm a teacher, so I'm going to say this, of study for exopolitics the way we did for exobiology. Get the subject out of the ghetto. Stop emphasizing the ridicule factor. So exobiology, we talk about that. Why can't we talk about the protocols for future contact? Okay, this is Alan Hynek. This is who I worked for from 1980 to 86. The reason why I got involved with him, and there's a very young Paula Harris, is because Alan, I had seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, had an emotional reaction, cried at the end when they had that, you know, Jacques what's his name, Francois Truffaut, who was the director who played Jacques Vallée, and he had this interaction with the beings. There's Paula Harris working for CUFOS. I was a field investigator for the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, but that's not really what I did. I did all his Italian translations and spent a lot of time with this man. So I really loved when he sent me this paper, and it said, laugh, laugh, study, study. Because you know how heavy this subject matter is? You've got to have a sense of humor here, or you don't get anywhere. And so I think that the definition, if I were to do a definition of exopolitics, and I have 2 books on this, exopolitics is the convergence of a new interdisciplinary science, an international political movement, a new paradigm which all deal with the wide range of implications of extraterrestrial life, which means sociologically, spiritually, scientifically. How do you deal with contact? I love one of the presentations here. Who represents planet Earth? Where are they going to go if we ever have formal contact? Would they go to the Chinese that have more people? Where are they going to go? When we have formal contact, something needs to be in place. Maybe not the United Nations. This is an MJ-12 letter, 1947, before Roswell. And it's good to look it up. It's on Ryan and Bob Wood's website. It's the Einstein-Oppenheimer document that addresses what I address in my book. It says relationships with celestial inhabitants. You know, which means, never mind the craft, because they knew they saw the craft. They were down at White Sands. They were down at Trinity site. They saw craft like crazy. There's photos of UFOs when they were exploding the atomic bomb. There's real photos of the visitations there. But then there's this incident in 1945 that I'm going to talk about where Oppenheimer was present. So we got problems because it's like opening a Pandora's box. We explode a bomb, and it's really sad if you go into the details. When Jose Padilla told me that he was 30 miles away, they hadn't told the inhabitants of San Antonio, so his mom opens the door when the bomb goes off and she's blinded. They were told that it was a missile dump, and they were going to explode a missile, some kind of missile dump or some kind of nuclear dump, and not a bomb. They weren't told that. The animals suffered. His mom was blinded. Remy's bed went from one side of the bedroom to the other. No warning at all. What happened in that area is what I'm talking about today. And this letter, June of 1947, says, hey, Truman, guess what? We opened up a Pandora's box. There's something visiting us, especially in that area. That's why we got New Mexico problems. What do? And they suggest a supra-United Nations. I don't know what that means. They said, our United Nations can't handle this. We need to create a supra-United Nations. This document is in my book. It's 5 pages long. It's very interesting. I need help with this. This is supposedly the Robertson panel who discussed the history of how to deal with the UFO phenomenon and the disclosure part of it, and you see Einstein and Oppenheimer. I don't know who those other guys are. If anybody can recognize those guys, I would really, Bob Wood recognized one of them, but if anybody can help me with that. This is a manual that was put out about biological viruses, which is a new book that Bob is going to release. It's so important because I don't know where the ridicule factor can deal with this kind of situation. Are we going to have biological viruses? Yeah. What about the Virginia case where Marco Charisse died 2 weeks? This is in Virginia, Brazil, 2 weeks after he put the little being on his lap to bring him to the hospital. Can't tell Marco Charisse that UFOs aren't real. His family is still, around. And he developed tumors under his arm because nobody told him to put a plastic down or to be careful not to just pick up the being. By the way, that being was not a gray, so the world is not built with grays. It was a little being that had, it was reddish skin, and the little girls that saw him cowering in a corner thought that he looked like the devil. But it was a crash, and the Americans picked up the craft. You're not going to throw a craft in the trash. Not even in 1945, you're going to throw a craft in the garbage. So let's use logic here. We've got back engineering. And who talked about this? Another hero is Colonel Philip Corso. So what I did with Colonel Philip Corso when I met him in 1997 is I brought him to Italy twice. He spoke extensively. Here he is with Robert Dean and Carlos Diaz. And we had dialogue. Dialogue, that's all it takes. You know, get around a table, everybody talk. Let's figure this thing out. And it was very interesting because this is what needs to happen. And here I am with Corso in Italy, people asking him questions, and he was taken seriously. The man was not lying. The problem with the book was it had some mistakes. He was not at Roswell. It was written by Bill Burns, UFO Hunters. So what happened is we had his original manuscript, which is called The Dawn of a New Age. And if you want to read it, you have to go to Open Minds TV, and you click on there, and you can read Corso's original manuscript, which does not have the Roswell errors. Did we try to do something in Italy in 1998? Yeah, we tried to open this up in front of the United Nations because we had all these people present, Dr. Colin Andrews, even David Jacobs was here, and a lot of different people came together from all over the world to try to do a United Nations resolution, and Corso signed the paper. So we tried in 1998, didn't go through because they changed politics. So this is, now I'm going to go to Roswell. I'm going to go to the crashes. So we made an effort. We're making an effort worldwide to dialogue. I just came back from Italy and Belgium where I talked about the Sirius film. We put Italian subtitles under the trailer, and we talked about the citizen hearing so that the Italians know what's going on over here and we know what's going on over there. This is important. Some of these people are no longer with us if you look at that picture. Walter Hott, when I took this picture, I took it because I knew that we would be losing some of these guys. I interviewed all the Roswell people, including Glenn Dennis, who no longer talks. He was a mortician at Roswell, told me that he got a call for 6 children's caskets, and his first question logically is, where was the accident? You know, so there's a lot of things here that we need to record for the future. I'm going to actually run to that 1945 case because I want to show you the original video of the testimony of Jose Padilla, who was a 9-year-old. When I was in Italy in 2000, it was 2001, I read that the Socorro newspaper had printed a story about 2 little Mexican boys that had seen a crash in 1945. There was a drawing of the crash, and they actually saw it, and they saw it come in, and it had taken a right-hand turn and was embedded close to a hill. And I said to myself while I was in Italy, why doesn't somebody cover that story? What's wrong with people? I mean, these 2 little kids I'm sure they didn't make it up, and one's 6 and one's 9. And so, you know, this is serendipitously or coincidentally. In 2009, I became aware of Remy Baca, with whom I was sitting. There's Remy Baca. And he talked to me for 2 years on the phone before he told me the exact details of the story. They have to gain your trust. Thank God, because he just died June 12th of this year. And what happened was I was so taken by the story that I flew James Fox up to Gig Harbor, Washington, where he was living. And I said, James, get him on camera, please. James Fox is a documentary maker, very good, out of the blue. And I know what I saw, and he's always on Larry King Live. Now, he happened to be in Boulder because his sister was ill, so he was there for 3 months. I said, do me this favor. So he did it. He took the film footage that you will see, and he handed it all over to me. This is not a commercial product. This is for you. This is for the general public. So God bless him. Remy just died. Remy is the 6-year-old that was present during this. Now, this has to do with the atomic bomb. This has to do with nuclear, and I put Robert Salas's picture there because there are some people that are using this because they know that some of the reasons why we had the visitation, especially in New Mexico, have to do with the children discovered the matches. We changed paradigm. We became dangerous to interdimensional travelers. We became dangerous to ourselves. I heard Stephen say yesterday 200. Why do we need 200 each bumped? Why do we need that many? I know the French did 800 because there's an interview in one of my books of Guy Andronique. He came to my house and told me that he was part of a French 800 on the island of Fangatolfa. in the Bikini Atoll, and he told me about the UFO flyovers. He told me about that. That was the time they came in and stole everything out of my apartment, including the film footage in Rome. So I had to get him a second time, which I did. The thing is that you have to understand that they're not on vacation. These people could go to the Caribbean, and I call them people because we got to get a clue here. They're not all little grays running around. They are whoever's visiting us, and Clifford Stone said 57 different races. They're categorized in the Pentagon. Colonel Corso told me 52 are here for a reason. This is from the Owl Barn Cafe, which is near in San Antonio, which is about 30 miles from the Trinity site. Now, you know what's interesting about this? Because when you go to Trinity site, here's a quote from Oppenheimer that says, and it's sad, it says that he had begun with the detonation of the world's first atomic bomb at Trinity site, July 16, 1945. The site may be named Trinity by J. Robert Oppenheimer, director of the Los Alamos Nuclear Physics Laboratory, who said, at the blast, now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds, quoting the Bhagavad Gita. The detonation of the bomb marked the culmination of the Manhattan Project. Now, the death, it says here, the destroyer of worlds, plural, not the destroyer of planet Earth. Okay, so I noticed that because he was really plugged in. So let's go to 1945. So I got to talk to Remy for 2 years. It always takes 2 to 3 years for me to do any story because I have to go see the people. I went down to San Antonio 3 times on my own dime. I went up to Gig Harbor to visit him once. I sent James Fox, I sent John Rao, I sent Jaime Maussan up there because I want the story to come out. This is history. Remy Baca was 7 years old. And he was 6 years old, and here's Jose Padilla, 9 years old. And this is the White Sands and where the scientists were. But what's important is, I'm showing you the map where San Antonio. It's not Texas, it's New Mexico. Okay, this is where it is, the location of it. It says here the mileage chart, Trinity site, San Antonio, ground zero. So Remy did write a book. I think you said the book is, and you can get it, I think, still online, Born on Ground Zero at the edge of Area 51, something like that. It's just a title like that. So what happened was that I had been trying for the longest time to get to go see the site. The story is like this. There are 2 little boys on horseback. The father of Jose Padilla says, go out and look for a cow that's calving, but these cows were special. These cows, I think, came from I think he said they came from Spain, and they were a special kind of cow where they wanted to check where they were on the Padilla property. Now, the Padilla property is leased from the Bureau of Land Management, 100 acres, so it's big. And the 2 little boys found the cow, and they found the calf, but there was a big thunderstorm. Does that sound familiar? Thunder, lightning. Same thing happened at Roswell. Big thunderstorm. And they had to go and stay undercover in a cave or, they said, a cliff overhang. And while they're doing that, they witness a craft that comes in right in front of them, takes out a radar tower, and takes a right-hand turn in and stops. And where that craft stops, all the mesquite and all the brush is burning. It's burning pretty bad. They said it was burning our eyes. It was there was mesquite and underbrush. But they're curious because they thought it was a plane. These are 2 kids that had never seen television, don't know UFOs, don't know anything, and they walk down, and they're curious kids. And so Jose takes his binoculars, he looks, and this is what he sees. And he'll tell you this in person because Paula Harris is not the witness. Jose is, and that's what's important. He says, we saw these 3 creatures sliding back and forth. And he says sliding because evidently they weren't walking like they seemed to be gliding back and forth. And he said, and they made a high-pitched sound like when you go to kill a rabbit. He said, that's high squeal. And I don't know what that's like, but a lot of people do. And so Jose said, I thought they were hurt because I heard this loud squeal. But Remy starts to cry. And because Jose was ready to go in and help him. And I said, what they look like? He said, they were children. He said, they look like children. He said, except they look like mantis. big eyes that looked like insect eyes and arms that were very long. And he said, but they were the size of us. They were size of children. And he said, I was going to go, but when Remy started to cry, he says, we got back on our horses, we went back to the ranch, we told his dad, Jose's father, who got the sheriff, and the sheriff's name is Sheriff Apodaca. And in Remy's book, he will name the people that he remembers, like Sheriff Apodaca. Now remember, this is very close to Socorro, the Lonnie Zamora case. So I'd love to see a discussion of the Lonnie Zamora case, this case, and what was happening in that area. What's very important is that the Army took a long time to clean it up. It was 1 month. It's August 18th, July 16th. This is the first time they got a problem that they have to solve. So Jose tells me that the Army came and asked the father if they could cut the cattle guard because they were going to take the weather balloon out. Because they couldn't, the cattle guard gates, the gate was too short, and they couldn't get the weather balloon off of there. So what it is the two boys, being curious, they watched the cleanup, which took almost 8 days, he said. They brought in the flatbed truck. The 7 guys that were cleaning up are the same guys that hung out at the Owl Bar and Cafe, which is really interesting. And this is our trip down with James Fox. And his is Socorro. There's, I don't know if you know, but Hilton started his first, the Hilton of the Hilton Hotels was from San Antonio and started his first mercantile there. So this is the old Owl Bar and Cafe. This is the new Owl Bar and Cafe, very historical place. I went in to talk to those people about who came in there. That was the only watering hole and the only grocery store for those guys in the Manhattan Project. So you bet Oppenheimer went in there. In the back of this, there's the bar, the way it was. And the old bar and cafe behind there, what you see on the screen is where they call them the scientists' cabins were. So here we are. This is about 4 miles from the crash site. So, here's these 2 little boys. This is what they look like now because they were older. And there I am with Remy and Gig Harper discussing this because I've got in my hand a tin that he had. It was a Prince Albert tin where he found some of the kind of aluminum or whatever it is that was crumpled up and then went back to the shape, but he put it in this tin because it was his treasure. He was 6 years old, and he loved what he picked up. And I said, what happened to it? And he said, well, later on we fixed a windmill with it because the windmill pump wouldn't work or whatever, and we tried this aluminum stuff, and we put cord around it. I said, are you kidding me? It's gone. He said, yeah, unfortunately, we didn't know what we had then because it was in the Prince Albert can, and I just did that with it. So, he's talking about it. This is the site. This is Gig Harbor. This is Remy, who is no longer with us, who provided an interview for James. Plus, I put him on Coast to Coast. If you go back to the Coast to Coast archives, I put both of them on Coast. If you go to look this up, you'll hear what they say themselves. This is Remy's house. It's very important because and this is Jose Padilla. It's very important because when the boys were there, what happened is we watched the whole cleanup operation. There were same 7 guys that were working at Trinity that cleaned it up. No hazmat suits, just guys that worked there and that went to the Owl Bar and Cafe because the boys hung out there. And they were playing country music, and they didn't feel like cleaning all of it up, so they threw some pieces in a berm. They threw some pieces in a kind of a ditch, and the boys watched that. So they knew that there were pieces out there. Now, when I talked to Jose about going there, and it was hard, I'll tell you, 3 times I tried to go. The first 2 times I lost airline tickets. I tried to go down with a friend to cover this, and Jose's son became deathly ill the 2 times we tried to go down there. And so I said to James Fox, let's not say we're going. Let's get in a truck. Let's go down there. Let's knock on the door and tell them this is history. You better take us to the site because you may not be here. And as you can see, we lost 1 of them already. Jose agreed. He said, Paula, I have no problem with that. And he basically agreed to do that. He showed me his family. His mother was Native American. I got all the background on Jose because it's very important. That area, these are the young guys. The craft looked like this. It was avocado shaped with a little a dome on it. The beings look like this, or he said that's what they look like. And there's his father next to the windmill that they use that material to use. Now, the big part of the story is that while the boys, the 7 guys that were cleaning this up, once they hoisted this thing, put it on a flatbed truck, took it through their property, the Padilla property, had to cut the gate. When that happened, they went into the bar and cafe to have something to drink. So Jose jumps on the truck, goes into the craft, takes a crowbar and pulls a piece off. Okay? He pulls a piece off, and he'll explain he did that. He's not lying. He was 9 years old. He figured, I want something, I want a souvenir. They put it in the sheep herder's shed under the ground there. They lifted up the boards. They put it in the sheep herder's shed. They got, and years later, Jose FedExed it to Remy, who had that piece. And that's what the piece looked like. Now, I'm very confused about that piece. Oh, this is another piece they found in the cactus. I've had a piece like this analyzed in Italy, and it is terrestrial. It's a kind of aluminum. This is the piece that he pulled off. And I'm going, okay, that looks very terrestrial. But Remy insists that it isn't. Because, look at that very carefully. He cut off a piece of that. He says that in Colonel Corso's books, that under electron microscope, that if you look at some of these pieces, they look like insects. It says here, squashed insects with hundreds of legs spread out. Well, that's what the electron microscope showed for this piece. My theory, this is opinion, is that it was a lever, our stuff, that they put inside the craft that they pulled off. However, we won't know. And this is the crash site for the first time seen, and you see that big circle? I'll enhance it for you. I'll enhance it for you in the middle, the ground, nothing grows. There's little flowers around it. So you'll see that on the video. I got some pieces, too, while we were there. They are being analyzed at the University of Siena in Italy. I cut a piece off. Very strange looking, but I have to do it. So responsible media coverage is the key to disclosure. I really think it's important to open our eyes to the messages these cultures are visiting us. Near ground zero. I'm rushing at the end because I'm going to show you the video that James Fox and I did. James is a very close friend. He just did the interview with the big camera of a historical event with the one remaining witness who was there because he filmed Remy Baca up in Gig Harbor. We have to step up to the plate to talk about this and get these witnesses while they're still alive. I really believe that because whatever happens, and these 2 little kids aren't lying. They saw this, and they know they saw the beings, and they can't find the other people around that because you look at the timeline of 68 years ago, you want to add 20 years to that, they would be in their 90s. The problem is they don't talk until the end of their life, a lot of these people. So we need to establish a new worldview to look at an inhabited universe. The last slide is a conference that I am sponsoring up in Chicago, Illinois, with the help of MUFON Sam Moranto, May 2nd through 4th, talking about the O'Hare case, where we're going to talk about not only the radar reports, but witnesses, and it's only media. It's Lee Spiegel of the Huffington Post, former CNN anchor Cheryl Jones, James Fox, and we will discuss how the media treats these things. So I want, on my table there's some postcards because I want to do dialogue. I really do. Now if we can just put the DVD in, my part that I'm really thrilled about is you're going to get to see the real witness on location in the real place tell the real story. And that has nothing to do with me. That has to do with my being able to record this for 200 to 300 years from now, when hopefully your grandchildren will go to the university, try to do a research paper, and get the original source. And the only reason I say that is, as a teacher, I would never give an A to anybody who did internet research. I'm sorry. You need to go to original source material, what the actual person said and not what you think. And so what happens is that when I go on Facebook, I often put opinion is not. research? Because we get these pictures and they go, hoax. Like, oh yeah, that's your opinion. Did you analyze the photo? Did you talk? By the way, as far as analysis of photos, you also have to talk to the witness. It's not just analyzing the photo, because if that person saw that thing, it's important. It's important. So should we just go ahead and run the film? So this is the first time this has ever been shown, so this is for you.
The area over there.
So windy. Okay, so can you just maybe just talk a little bit about what you saw?
The size of the craft, where the position was.
It landed right in here. The position was that there was a little hump right there where it was leaning on its side, and you could see that the hole was from, we were behind that mountain right there, looking up this way, and the hole was facing up, I say the west, and that's where we seen these little creatures running back and forth, you know.
How close did you get to the craft when it crashed?
From that mountain right there?
So this little one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right behind there, the brush was pretty high there, you know. And there used to be cactus trees. It changed, you know, in the years, you know.
Right.
So let's describe some detail of what the craft looked like, its position, what you were thinking, all that.
It was a grayish color. The vegetation over here was burning. You know, a lot of smoke coming out of the ground. And that's what we see from there. The creatures, you know, that they never got out. They were just sashaying right through where that hole was, you know, on the object. And we stayed here for quite a while, and after that, you know, I was going to tell Remy. I told Remy I wanted to go there and help it because they were hurting. He says, no, he says, we better get home. At that time, you know, of course, it was getting late in the afternoon and the sun was going down.
Now, can you take these guys? I'm gonna film from here,
okay,
and just walk them around and show them exactly where the craft was, how it was positioned. Just describe every detail you possibly can,
mm-hmm,
and I'm just gonna film you guys. So you guys just talk to each other.
Let's get
No, I've got these boots on. They're perfect. Yeah.
but your step, you know, might.
No, but listen, Jose, I'm yeah. What is this? Because nothing grows in this spot.
Yeah. Careful.
That's where water collects. Okay. The water collects in this spot.
Water comes in this spot, but no vegetation grows like out here. You notice out here how it's green?
Yeah.
Nothing grows in here,
So
even if you plant it.
Is this the size of the craft?
Yes.
It
was 30 feet and an oval shape.
Because this is more than 30 feet.
Just get the scale of it.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say that it looks like this big.
Well, it rested right here.
Okay.
It rested right here because when they built that L frame, the truck was parked right in here. Okay. They loaded it on.
Yeah.
And they took it out from here.
So the L frame was over there.
Yeah, it was right in here.
The L frame. Okay, now where did the soldiers put the pieces that they were cleaning up?
Okay. There was a crevice down in here that led into that bunch of dirt right there. And I'll show you how the other side is, okay, where they pushed all that. Because this wasn't there before. The crevice was right down over here like that, and they were brushing everything inside. It's possible that there's pieces on the other side of that.
Remy always talks about digging for pieces. What could the pieces be on this other side?
When that bulldozer came over and cleaned up over here and built this dam here, it's possible that some of them pieces came up the ground. So sometimes, you know, you could.
A bulldozer
bulldozer came over here.
They dug some of that out, and the crevice that was right there where they pushed the pieces, it's possible that they pushed it up here.
Could they have done it on purpose to bury the pieces?
No. That was to build a dam over here for the water for the cattle.
Oh.
But there might be some pieces laying around, you know.
From where we're standing right now, the berm behind you wasn't there.
No, that was it was flat, down to about right here. It was flat. Afterwards, my cousin built this with a bulldozer so that he could build a dam to collect water for the cattle.
Can we just talk a little bit about the craft and about the occupants?
Yes. While we were there watching them, the occupants that were in there, like I said before, you know, they seemed to me like they were hurt. And we were here for a while. And like I said, I tried to convince Remy, you know, that we could come over and help them, because I know that they were injured. But Remy didn't want to do that, so we just went home. When we came back a couple of days later, that craft was still there, but all the remaining of the rubbish and all that wasn't, it looked like someone had raked everything and cleaned up. I don't know whether the soldiers came before that, before we got here, and clean up, or someone had to come over and clean up the. Okay, now, when my dad and the policeman went in the craft, they came out of there, you know, like a different person. I don't know what. Then the policeman decided, you know, that we should go, you know, and have them come over, you know, and take care of it. That's when they decided to bring that trailer, and they built that A-frame for that object, you know, to load it. But that object sat over here since 18th until the 26th. It was the 26th, about or later than this, that we seen the soldiers get on the jeep where that old highway is, I mean the old road, and they took off and no one stood here. That's when we decided to come down, you know, and see what was in there. That's when I took that part out.
Can we go up to where you were looking at the craft? Can we walk up there?
Oh, it's a long ways, but we can do it.
I think we should.
Right.
Okay, so you were standing here.
Okay.
Yeah.
We came up this ravine out here. We tied our horses down below on that arroyo. Then from there we walked up here. This was a big, huge mesquite. And here's where we were looking through the binoculars down below where that crab.
Tell me what you saw.
We seen that the crab there was smoking, burning on the bottom, the weeds. And that's where I seen through the binoculars that the three creatures were sashaying back and forth through the hole. But that hole was visible from here, on this side.
And tell me, explain once again why we have the wind has died down. So you came from where? Show me.
What's that?
Show me where you came from.
We came from this ravine out here on the east. Came out, we got off our horses down below on the arroyo there and tied them down to a mesquite. From there we walked all the way up here, came out to where there used to be a big tree mesquite here. From here, so we started looking at that object up there where he had landed.
How big was the object compared to that truck down there?
About 4 times bigger and an oval shape.
Wow. So could the hole in the truck the hole in the craft be as big as that whole truck?
If you turn the truck upright, it was a good probably 8 feet by 15 feet high.
What did the creatures look like?
Just like little boys.
Can you give me any more description?
There was a grayish color, light grayish color. Their arms were long, and I noticed that they had 4 fingers only on each hand. They didn't have no ears, unless they were wearing a tight uniform.
What about their eyes?
Their eyes were teardrop, big eyes, teardrop shape.
Were they scary?
No. It didn't seem to me like they were scary. My name is Jose Padilla. I was born on November 24th, 1936. I was 9 years old at that time when we were on this territory. We were looking for a cow that was going to calve.
Could you take your glasses off, or do you need them?
No.
Do you need them?
No. I can see too good, but. And we were dodging the rain, a heavy storm, when a real thunder came up. And I told Remy, it must be another test from another bomb. And he says, no, he says, it doesn't look like that. So we got from underneath the ledge of the rocks, and he says, look at the smoke coming up from the ledge out there. So we got on the horses and trot down the arroyo. We stopped over here, tied the horses over to a mesquite. We start walking up the hill. And that's when we seen more smoke coming out. And went over to the ledge of the hill there, and we seen this big, huge something, that object. And it happened, I had my binoculars, so I started looking around, and through a hole of it, I seen that these 3 creatures were sashaying back and forth.
Describe to me what the object looked like, and roughly how far away, the color, the shape, everything.
Okay, that ship or craft, whatever you want to call it, was about, I see in measuring on footsteps, it might have been about 30 feet long on an oval shape, and almost higher than the rafters on a house. Now the rafters on a house are usually 15 feet.
Okay, so you're looking at this object. What was the shape?
It was shaped on an oval shape.
Okay.
The colors was like a grayish.
So you're looking at this object. What are you thinking?
Thinking, what is it? And afterwards, you know, when we seen these creatures running back and forth, I wasn't scared. Remy was scared. He wanted to get out of there. And I told him, look, just little people there running back and forth. And they're squeaking like a rabbit. And I started thinking, well, are they animals or what, you know? But after that, you know, I said, well, let's go in there, you know, and help them. Maybe they're hurt, you know. Which I was pretty sure that they were injured. That's what they were running back and forth squealing. And then he says, no. He says, we better get home, you know. Afterwards, he says, you go ahead and go. He says, I'm going to go on the horse and take off. That's when then he started crying. And we just got back on the horses and took off. Went home, told my dad about it. And he says, we'll wait a couple of days, we'll go and check it out.
Did your dad believe you?
At first he didn't. But then when I told him, you know, we seen that, you know, then he started realizing, you know, that we seen something that, so he took off at work that day, and this policeman came over, you know, and gave him a ride over here, and we got on our pickup truck, Remy and I, and we drove. When we drove down where that turn was right there, that was real dangerous, we couldn't see nothing. It looked like someone had pushed rubbish and all that on top of it, you know, where you couldn't see it. Then the sun started shining up. That's when we started looking at the big object that was laying there. But someone had swept the ground with something and cleaned up everything that was there. That was there when we left it, the day and a half.
Can you describe to me in better detail how you saw these kids, as you described them, these children, or whatever they were, how the gash, I guess it was an opening in the...
There was a gash on that ship that was ripped, like, for example, a panel that was ripped off.
Grab a rock, for instance, if you could show me if it was something like this. Just show me, you know, describe to me, show me with your hands how the object was on the ground. Can you put it down to the ground? What angle you saw it at, where the gash was, all that. Can you show me?
The object was sitting that way. The gash was on this side right here.
Looking at these kids, describe to me what they look like, color, their skin, their eyes.
They were bull-headed, slang eyes, teardrop eyes, no ears, unless they had a coating of something on it. And I noticed that their shoulders were kind of narrow, but had long arms. And what surprised me that they had 4 fingers.
Only 4 fingers?
Only 4 fingers on this hand.
Long arms?
Yeah, long arms. Longer than, probably longer than what a monkey would have.
Were they naked?
They didn't show no sign of genitals or anything. You know? Just like it seemed like it was like a tight uniform, or if that was their skin. The nose, you know, you can see no holes for the nose, you know, where they could breathe. The mouth was an open, real round, kind of round.
Okay, and then what were they doing?
Like I said, they were just running back and forth, you know, like trying to hold each other. For example, if they were lacking of oxygen and trying to, you know, help each other on
it. What did you think to yourself when you saw them? What were you thinking?
I wasn't thinking. I was just surprised, you know, that it's a shock. I was just surprised to see anything like that we had never seen anything on our lives, not even on pictures. Pictures never showed anything of UFOs or anything like that. And to me, when they stand up and they're going back and forth, when I look at it without looking at it through the binoculars, they remind me of a fire ant standing up. The way that their head was, and the shoulders and all that.
What do you say to someone who says you're making this whole story up for attention? How do you respond to that?
Well, I would ask them, if they were there, and if they weren't, I was.
Okay, well, this is historical because it's the first time that we've ever told this story. For me, I've, read the other crashes in the New Mexico area. I've read all the books. And I want to say something at the end of my presentation. I'm a teacher, so I don't understand why people are not reading anymore. I have read all my colleagues' books because I have to connect dots. I love the new book that Grant Cameron just came out with is amazing. Bob Wood's new book. I've got these books because I have to figure this out. I'm curious. So may I encourage you, number one, to read. You can do it with Kindle, but read the material, the original material. And number two, I want to end my presentation by saying that this is like a football team who has a quarterback. This year, I believe the quarterbacks are Stephen Bassett and Stephen Greer. What's amazing about the UFO field, it's the only field where the quarterbacks sometimes turn around and can't find the team. They're trying to score the goal. And what you have to understand is if either one of those guys or any of you or anybody else scores a goal, we all win. Disclosure happens. It becomes logical. They invite you to deal with it without ridicule. We all win. May I encourage people to be positive, not to infight, forget the ego, do not bash other people publicly, and study it like an academic subject. I don't know where you could get a degree in anthropology or anything else without, number one, reading, and with number one, getting other people from all over the world around a table to discuss anthropology, geology, geophysics, anything. It's all done with collegial support. I really want to encourage this field to have collegial support. We'll get farther, we'll score this darn goal, and after 30 years, I can rest. Because I'm rooting for everybody that has the courage to do something, not just say, but do something. So if you think that there's money here, forget it. Everything we did is out of our own pockets, and my kids think I'm nuts. They want me to go to the Caribbean on a vacation. They don't want me to use money this way. They won't even talk about the subject matter. The sacrifices that we make for disclosure, this that you've seen that's probably going to be taken seriously 200 years from now, all of this is part of a very important, the most important, as Stephen Greer said, question for humanity. Are we part of a cosmic culture? And I thank you so much for...
I mean, you never felt as much pity as what you would have felt at that time. There was a little place called Vietnam. It was only, several thousand miles away from home, and I too was afraid at 19. But the whole situation is, these were things we were never going to talk about. These were things that we were never going to bring up. These were things I was going to keep from my family. Then the day arrived. I felt that my family had a right to know I wasn't there for certain things. Why sometimes I was quick to snap. And why I could never, ever have the luxury of having friends, because I might say something. So when the day finally arrived that I felt that I should tell them, I told them. And I was very afraid even at that time telling them, but I thought they had a right to know. Tonight I come to you as a scared individual, a scared little man, telling you just a piece of what went on in my life. There were other incidences, but I felt you too might like to know that that is the case. And I said it yesterday and I'll say it again, that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. It's evidence that is just simply denied to the American people. I stand here to tell you that before my Almighty God, I am willing to go and stand before Congress and tell them what I have told you tonight as being the truth, and I interrelate more of the events that have occurred, because I have that. Moral obligation not only to my family but to every American and every person on the face of this planet. I have that moral obligation, possibly even to our visitors. The situation is we're not alone in the universe, and I just thought you might like to know. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Had it been fully over it, you couldn't even see the scene. But in this case, it was open. Once I got there, I went ahead and I looked down, and I knew what I was looking at wasn't human in our definition of human, in that it was smaller. The head was much larger proportionately than what the head of a human being would be. It was hanging out over the side, and I was pretty sure it was dead. Alongside of it was another one that was hanging out halfway out, one arm, one head, and I was getting a higher than average background radiation reading at that time. And I told him that. Then I went ahead and I said, I need an officer up here. And all I heard was, it's okay, son, just tell us what you're seeing. I said, no, sir, I don't think you understand. I need an officer up here. And they says, just tell us what you're seeing. And I told them essentially what I've told you tonight. That would be the first case that I'd ever be involved in as far as making an approach to entities in which we saw that had been killed. I can tell you there were 4 entities in that crash. Wasn't too awful long after that I got to see a live one. In that incident, I can tell you we had communications with that entity. And I can tell you one of the words that rang loud and true in my ears, I am afraid. Me and another me and another soldier assisted that entity in escaping. The guy I always called the colonel, who was really the guy that always led the teams that we were on, every team I was on anyhow, he came and was telling me what could happen to me, very angry at me. He said, do you know what the penalties are giving aid and comfort to the enemy? And I said, excuse me, sir, I thought you called him a guest. And he says, well, don't let it happen again. I told him if I was caught in the same situation, I'd do it again. I could identify with that entity's very simple, I won't go into how I knew, but simple verbiage, I am afraid. My family always thought that I volunteered too much, and I love my country, and I laid down my life for my country as I would today. But my family always thought that I was volunteering. They'd go see my commanders and try to tell them I'm working too much. Lost 90 days of leave that I had to give back to the U.S. government because I couldn't take the leave. And that upset the family. But what they didn't know is what I'm going to tell you tonight. There were craft that did not originate on the face of this planet. They had living beings in them. Living entities, people, very much like you and myself. When I say that, I mean that they had cultures, they had lives, they had families, they had likes, they had dislikes. It wouldn't take me too awful long after being exposed to the program where we were doing recoveries that I came to realize this. But then I could never ever tell my family what I was doing. I'm wanting to relate one incident to you. And that one incident is the incident that really propelled me on to that type of situation. And that happened at a place called Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. I was in the 36 Civil Affairs. That's a 36 Civil Affairs company. That's a group that would go out and establish a military government pending the establishment of a civilian government should we be involved in a conflict in which we would take over a foreign country. We would naturally want to return civilian leadership to that country, and that would be the job of the civil affairs units in trying to establish that goal. However, each company in 1969 had NBC units, and I was a member of the NBC unit. That was my primary job, as the unit NBC NCO and the communications NCO. Exact day, month, I can't tell you, because I never ever planned to relive this, never ever planned to tell a group about this, but I can tell you the year was 1969 when we went out on that field training exercise. Somewhere during the course of the night, we had some people.
Presentation with a video that you need to see. It was part of the Disclosure Project, Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project in 2001. And the reason why I want to start with this video is because I'm going to be talking about crash retrieval, and today, for the first time ever, I'm going to release a brand new case. So I'm going to show you the testimony of Clifford Stone. And I think it's very important. This was done in Washington, D.C. I think you need to hear what he has to say. And if we could go ahead and start this.
Washington, D.C., and our government states that UFOs don't exist. This is from the Blue Book files, the overflights of July 19th, 20th, and 26th, 27th of UFOs over Washington, D.C., in which they said they were nothing more than temperature inversions. Of course, the air traffic controllers did not understand that, because they were saying they were good, solid returns, craft under intelligent control that was exhibiting technologies that we could not do at that time. But then again, no one ever found any pieces, or did they? Actually, a Navy commander found a piece that he turned over to the U.S. government. That piece was never returned. Most people don't know that this exists in the Project Blue Book files. He did his own analysis. Then he asked the Air Force what they thought of the piece. They never returned it. The point I'm trying to get at is that for 22 years in the military, I didn't let my family know what I was doing. And you pay a price for that. People come up and tell us that there was a craft that crashed, possibly a U.S. aircraft, may have some type of nuclear device on it, and we were going to move out to that location, just the NBC team. You form what's called an NBC quick response team, and when I wasn't on an FTX or doing my normal duties back at the unit in which I was, you would have a staging area where for 3 days you would be on a 30-minute alert notice to move out should there be an NBC emergency. After that 3 days, you had another unit come in. There was 5 units. So out of 15 days, you would pull 3 days where you were on a 3-day alert. When we moved out to the location, we started to approach the location where we were seeing lights. They had the big lights, and I understand those lights are called light-alls. We saw that there was some type of craft, like the shape of a hill, that was buried into the ground. As we approached it, I didn't think too much of it. I was trying to ascertain what type of craft it could be, but I couldn't readily recognize it. Once we did get to our location, what we call our staging area, I immediately started to go ahead setting up the 312 telephones that we needed set up, and our Prick 25 within our communications deuce and a half, and that's what we were using, was a deuce and a half for our communications vehicle. I set the one Prick 25, which is a field radio, on the company push, then the emergency push that we had for the unit that was out there, which I was assuming was a quick response team, to this location. I was immediately told, specialists, do you have a APD-27 on board your vehicle? I turned around and said, yes, sir, I do. He says, get it out, and you need to walk toward the craft. We need surface readings as to the radiation count. So I started to go ahead, get it, and I was walking toward it, and I was yelling out the counts as every time that the Geiger counter would shoot up. Once I got to the craft where it was buried partially at about a 30-degree slant into the ground, I could look down into the craft, and I saw what appeared to be a cockpit. The cockpit wasn't open. On the side of the craft was like a kidney-shaped hatch that